Well, hello, everyone. As we're entering into the final days before the midterm elections, politicians and candidates across the nation are carefully watching the polls to get a sense of what Americans are thinking and, more importantly, what they're concerned about. Well, the number one concern for an overwhelming majority of Americans is the economy. And it's not just the national economy, although that is a major concern, but what people most care about is their personal economy. People in all wage brackets are feeling the effects of inflation, but those that are affected the most are the middle-class, hard-working Americans. You see, inflation is eating away at their pocketbooks to a point that just cutting back and being frugal isn't enough anymore. Just in the past year, everything has skyrocketed in price, from gasoline to groceries, and they're still climbing. I was talking with a constituent earlier this week who told me that just a year ago she was paying about $2.50 for a carton of 18 eggs. Now those same eggs are over $8 a carton. You see, nationally we're seeing skyrocketing costs for everything. Eggs are up 40%, airline travel is up 34%, gasoline is up 26%, milk, it's up 16%, and electricity is also up nearly 16%. This is becoming a serious situation for families all across America, especially those in rural areas. You see, they don't have access to the big box stores or large chain discount stores. Inflation is costing middle-class Americans about the equivalent of 1 month's salary. Now, a month's salary is about 8.3% of your annual income. And with inflation just above 8.4%, that's the equivalent of 1 month's salary. Now, imagine giving up an entire month's salary. Can you afford that? Well, that's exactly what many Americans are struggling with, and that's why the economy is their number one concern. Our economic struggles, whether it's inflation, supply chain, or the employment crisis, are the result of three basic policies enacted by the president and congressional Democrats. First is the price of oil, which has skyrocketed because of Joe Biden's regulatory war on American oil. The second is rampant government spending, which not only significantly increased our national debt, it was the exact wrong thing to do when we already had a supply chain and employment crisis. Third is the government's regulatory war on business. The price of energy, especially fossil fuels, affects every aspect of consumer prices. Consider producing a loaf of bread, which, by the way, the cost has risen over 16%. The loaf of bread at the grocery store actually started with a farmer preparing his field to plant wheat. The plowing and fertilizing of the field is done by a tractor, which most of them run on diesel fuel. So as the cost of diesel goes up, the cost to prepare the field goes up. Next, he has to purchase the seeds, which cost him more now because the cost to ship the seeds are higher because the cost of fuel has gone up. Again, planting, irrigating, and harvesting the wheat are more costly because every time he fills up his tractor and other farm equipment, the cost of fuel keeps getting more expensive. Therefore, the wheat he sells to the baker, he has to charge more to cover his rising cost. Now, once the wheat is sold, it has to be transported from the farmer to the baker, which will likely go by truck, train, or ship, which, again, will charge more because their cost of fuel is higher. So now the baker is not only paying more for the wheat, he's paying more for the transportation of that wheat, which has exponentially raised his costs. But it doesn't end there, because with the price of electricity up over 16%, it will now cost significantly more to run the ovens to bake the overpriced wheat. The same goes for the packaging, the shipping to the grocer, who, by the way, is paying more in electricity to keep the lights and the freezers running. You see, this is just an illustration of how increasing the price of fuel through terrible policy can have a drastic impact on Americans. The cost of fuel just doesn't affect every product, but it affects every phase of the production and delivery of these products. When Joe Biden, in his first week as president, declared war on American oil producers by making it harder and more expensive to produce, he had a deep and long-lasting effect on our economy at all levels. But that in itself wasn't enough for congressional Democrats. They had to have their shot at destroying the economy as well. Through their reckless spending in the American Rescue Plan, they dumped trillions of dollars into stimulus programs that were not needed. Even Democrat economists warned that this bill would catapult inflation, advice which Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden all ignored, obviously with disastrous results. The American Rescue Plan was chock full of incentives and subsidies that further discouraged Americans from returning to work, making our employment crisis even worse. Then the Democrats started cracking down on American businesses through oppressive regulations, which made it more expensive to produce products and harder to find employees. The rising price of energy, which was started by terrible policy by President Biden, reckless spending by congressional Democrats, and a crackdown on small businesses through increased regulations, any of these alone would cause an increase in prices. But when they are all done within a short amount of time, well, that was a recipe for disaster that we're all experiencing right now. So we know what the problem is, but the real question is, what can be done? Well, since big government caused the problem, the first step is to get big government out of the way. First, the new Congress needs to end the federal freeze on oil and gas leases. According to the Wall Street Journal, oil and gas leases under President Joe Biden have dropped by 97% as compared to the previous administration. Second, Congress needs to force the administration to fast-track liquid natural gas export permits. And third, we must immediately get pipeline projects such as the Keystone XL pipeline back on track. And we have to stop the regulatory assault on U.S. energy development and financing. This is basically undoing what was done in the first week of the Biden presidency. If we can put America back on top as the world's #1 energy producer and exporter, we'll see an almost immediate drop in energy prices, which will resonate across the entire economy. These are priorities of the congressional Republicans, and the details of our plan to bring down these prices and get our economy rolling again, it's spelled out in our commitment to America. If you'd like to find out more about our plans to rebuild the economy and lower prices, I encourage you to visit the Commitment to America website at commitmenttoamerica.com.